and we are permitting now the Indian camps to be organized at our facilities. So we are open, but it's case to case basis. Basically, it's related to security.
Fair enough. KDS sir, you've been very, very closely involved with the Sports Authority of India, and now with your role as well with the government with Assam. Can you share with us, like the Sports Authority of India is fundamental in creating infrastructure for high performance and influencing how good quality infrastructure needs to be created. What are your views in terms, because I also, they had this recent initiative to open up all the SAI infrastructure for the general public as well. So can you share some more thoughts about how you all are approaching creation of infrastructure and its utilization?
Prior to Sports Authority of India's posting, I was in Sports Ministry for 5 years. And I'll share 2-3 things which I very strongly felt about. One, we had a scheme called PICCI when I was in the Sports Ministry. And while handling that scheme, I found that the real challenge of infrastructure is in our villages. Because a large number of villages even today don't have a decent playing field. Even many schools don't have a good playing field. In many areas where we have good playing fields, we do not have security. We do not have the environment in which especially girl children can go and play. So this PICCI scheme was launched, and we were giving 1 lakh rupees for creation of a play field in a village. And I found that this scheme did make some mark, but it did not create the desired results. I personally felt that there were two, 3 things which were responsible for this. One, this scheme was structured in such a way that it required a lot of cooperation from the state governments. From some state governments we had good cooperation. From some other state governments we did not receive very good cooperation. So in certain states it did well, in certain states it did not do well. The second thing that I found was some state governments felt that 1 lakh rupees is too meager an amount. Too meager an amount not for creation of a football field, but to waste one's time and energy on. So I realized that it's very much required that people are made aware of what I call the impact of sports on developing character and personality. When we talk of sports, we talk of fitness, we talk of entertainment, but then sports has other qualities to give. That awareness is, I think, limited. Second thing I realized when I was Joint Secretary, I paid a visit to Shimla, and I went to see a sports facility on the Mall Road, and I found that it was teeming with activity. Many of you would have seen, it's a multi-storied hall at the end of the Mall Road, and on every floor you have some sports going on, and I found that every floor was full of children and parents. So I realized then when you talk of participation, you must have infrastructure which is well connected by transport, which is easily accessible. It does not matter if it is not a fancy infrastructure. It was on the Mall Road, so people were going to Mall Road anyway. So in that sense, it was accessible. So I realized in our country it may not work if we have we have an idea that we require a big space away from the town, and we create infrastructure and then people don't go there. It is not connected to transport. Third thing that I want to say is, I was handling a scheme called National Sports Development Fund in Sports Ministry. And the purpose of the fund was to attract corporate money primarily into infrastructure. And I found that that scheme did not make the desired progress, because what the corporates were interested in was good product, what we had to offer, and they were also very interested in what you call client servicing. So where we talk about public-private partnership or government-corporate partnership, I feel that despite corporate CSR and all this, it will really work when you have good products to offer, and when you have good products to offer, and when you can do the client servicing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Talking about, taking off from the last part where we're talking about the corporate involvement. The Tatas are known for the legacy that they have had with Indian sport, and with regards to Tata Steel, again, it's quite well known about the number of athletes that have been beneficiaries of the facilities and that have been set up by the Tatas. So would request Mr. Chowdhury to give a little bit more insight, because it's a combination. One is the role of the corporates in developing a certain quality of infrastructure. At the same time, it's also about how do you find the right partnerships to make it effective for the outcomes.
Well, thanks, Hakim. So I think from a Tata Steel perspective, it's come easy for us when we sit 110, 112 years down when our company was set up, because this came as a part of legacy that whichever area the Tatas went, they would obviously go in for business, but along with it, health, education and sports. These were the three verticals on which work would start simultaneously. So the infrastructure for sports, which today everyone talks about Jamshedpur because that's the oldest steel plant in Asia and so on and so forth. But wherever we have gone as an organization, in let's say in two places in Orissa now, or in our mining locations, sports goes along with the operation, so to speak. When I say sports goes along with it, it means the infrastructure goes, and automatically when you set up infrastructure, there will be boys and girls who will join. Then there will be a need for coaches and so on and so forth. I think what we have seen, and when we introspect and when we review our own performances, over a period of time, obviously we've heard in the inaugural speech as well that India is a large country, has a lot of big population, and obviously you can't expect one or two individual companies, individuals or government on their own can do everything and get excellence out as a champion. So obviously every one of us needs to think through, join hands, become partners and go forward. If I look at the last 30 years that I have spent in the company, I think that partnership has worked in bits and pieces with the government. We've had good academies. We have a football academy, we have the archery academy, we have now set up a hockey academy in Jamshedpur and in Orissa, and we also have an athletic academy which has not been doing too well, and we have some 15-16 training centers. So we've always tied up with the government schemes, primarily because I think government, when it comes out with its schemes, it's not only for, it's not for fund that comes in, but when you get connected to a government scheme, you also get access to a lot of coaches, a lot of other things which we may not think as a corporate, and then jointly we could work together and create champions. And in the past, what we have seen, it has worked well, as I said, but what happens is that the infrastructure gets set up once, whether it is by the government or individuals or corporates or whoever. But if you don't utilize the infrastructure, it loses out. Money is spent, it's gone. We've seen Commonwealth Games in Delhi, and post that what we have gone through. I think that way our own experience in Tata Steel has been that we've been utilizing it because we've got academies and training centers. We've also got some of the SAI Excellence Center connections for boxing and athletics. But it takes, I think what needs to be done is what we keep looking in business is more of ease of doing business. So once it is tied up, then there need not be follow-up. Coaches have to come, stipend has to come, it will fall through. But those things don't happen very smoothly in India. And what happens in the end? The champions don't get created. And I think somewhere we have very good example now with Orissa. They've actually done well in setting up the infrastructure for sports, and they have actually tied up with not one, not two, about 6, 7 of the corporates, both public and private sector, where they said, this is the infrastructure I have, will you come and run it for us for a particular sport? Like Tatas have signed up for the hockey. Similarly, I know about Dalmia, JSW, badminton, Gopi, and so those kind of things I think are the right thing, because then the burden is not only on the government or individuals, it's spread, and every individual partner would work to ensure that by the end of it you get some excellent sports persons.
Thank you. In the context to that, is there now more integration? Like I remember during the Commonwealth Games, there was an attempt to get the corporates to also come in and participate on the infrastructure, but it was felt at that point it was a little late and it wasn't at the initial stages. So it possibly didn't work out as was planned. But now with Orissa, is it any different? Is there now an opportunity for the corporates to come in earlier so that they can participate even in ensuring that the design of the infrastructure and the utilization thereafter is appropriately planned?
See, my own sense is that government actually gets the best of the architects and designers. They know what is the best. That's not the problem. At times the problem becomes in funding. At times government will say, I don't have the budget, how do I bring this in? And we've seen it in our own state of Jharkhand, Orissa, where we operate national games in Jharkhand. They wanted the partners within Jharkhand to come, Steel Authority, Tata Steel, Vedanta and a few others. We all joined hands. But what Orissa has done, and maybe a few other states are now really doing it well, is that once the event is over, don't allow the infrastructure to languish and ensure that you utilize the thing. How do you utilize? You can't expect again the government to say, "Acha, humko aaj hockey bhi chalana hai, football bhi chalana hai." You can possibly say, "Okay, I'll host an event." But getting partners who would then dedicate themselves to maybe one sport or two sports, put in their labor, put in their funds, work together, infrastructure is right there, and ensure that you pick up good talent from the vicinity or from the proximity of where you are, or around the country, it doesn't make a difference. So even in our experience with the Naval Tata Hockey Academy in Jamshedpur and in Orissa, though our aim has always been to pick up talent locally in the states, but a few 10 to 20% we go around the country to pick up. Similarly for our football academy, when we're running it for the last 30 years now, Tata Football Academy in Jamshedpur, we find that whenever you are able to link, and I'm not saying it only individual as a company, but along with the government and the partners, if you are able to link from a grassroots to a national team or an international event, I think you've made the dent, and it is only a time thing, how much time will it take, but people will reach there. We've got some good examples from Jamshedpur in archery, and some of the boys and girls have really done well. And then let them free. They can decide where to go after they've reached a particular level, because then they start thinking international. It's great. But I think if you are able to connect from the grassroots along with the infrastructure which the government has provided or any other party has provided, and link it through to the championships, support them when they need it, you are there.
Thank you. That sets us off well for Mr. Agarwal, who's like while everyone on my left have been part of larger organizations, Mr. Agarwal is trying to create something from a more private, personal perspective, create infrastructure that similarly creates a pathway for someone to come in very young, enjoy learning sport, and so if you could share more about what your motivations are to create quality infrastructure and see it being and see different outcomes from it.
Right. So just to introduce myself, I'm Kunal. I'm from Pune. I studied in Pune, grew up, everything, and since childhood I was an athlete and I was representing my school and at the state level at various sports. But in those days, back in the 90s, there was no pathway for sport, and it still exists. There is no current creative pathway for sport, just like we have pathways today in India to become architects, doctors, lawyers, engineers. Do we have career pathways to become sports persons? Like the Honorable Minister Kiran Rijiju said that, if there is no career option for a sports person or an athlete, what is the point? Why would he get into sport? And if you look at the history of Indian sport, you will see that, by and large, I'm not saying all, but by and large, the top name athletes, whoever have come up and made it, have come despite the system. So we need to address that, what is wrong with the system, and that is why we've come up with this concept called the Edx Campus, which we are building in Pune. What it aims to do is exactly what we've been talking about, is to try and create a pathway for sport. So what does that mean? It means that, taking the whole holistic development, right from introduction of sports, various sports, Olympic sports, to children at a very young age. Today, if you look at a city like Delhi or a city like Pune or any big metro in India, you will see that, you have a very big young population of people from the age between, 5 to 30, you've got probably 20-30 lakh of such people in each city. But I would say, not even 100 of them would have actually ever seen, felt or touched a javelin. So if you're not introducing them to that sport at an early age, or you're not telling them what it is, how are they going to get into that sport, and how are they going to, get attracted towards that sport? So what the Edx Campus does is basically it provides a combination of academics and sport, because most of the parents that we talk to and most of the people, are sport averse, because they say that, okay, if I put him into sport, him or her into sport, what about his education? Is he going to be, and what's beyond his sporting career? Because we have to understand that, sporting careers are very short. Typically, the best athletes retire, when they are in their mid-30s. And then beyond that, what? Like the previous panels have talked about, most of these athletes are, ending up literally begging for jobs, ending up as security guards in banks, which we have seen. Because we've been running this foundation called Go Sport Foundation since the last, we are in our 12th year now. And we've been funding a lot of athletes across sports, primarily Olympic athletes, and Hakeem has been very instrumental with us in that as well. And what we saw there is that, that there is no dearth of talent, of course. I can give you an example of Kidambi Srikanth. When we got him on board, he was probably 14 or 15, from a village in Guntur, and he had, he'd never traveled outside Guntur, and now he's traveled all over the world, and last year he became world #1 in men's badminton. So in a 10-year journey, we've taken him from being a village athlete or a village boy to, becoming a global superstar. Beyond that, what's happened is that he suddenly got access to a lot of money and grants and, funds, etc., from governments, from various sporting manufacturers, etc., and now he does not know what to do with the money. Because, again, like I said, he's missed out on a lot of education when he was growing up and focusing on sport. So the Edx Campus, what it plans to do, or what the vision is, to try and create that infra where any child who comes in over there can get access to 100 Olympic sports. He can get exposed to those sports at a very young age, and by the time he's 9 or 10 years old, we can tell, or our counselors can tell, that whether these children, who are the children to be, how are they segregated, that these kids are good at athletics, these are good at track and field, these are good at aquatics, these are good at racket sports, etc., etc., and then try and provide them career pathways while not sacrificing the education, so that tomorrow, if he does not make it sport, because just like any other industry, the sport industry has such a high attrition rate. You have probably 0.1% of athletes who start at an early age actually making it and representing India, representing the nations and going further. So what we want to do here is that try and create this whole system where, the children are learning, they're also getting exposed to sport, but they're also not missing out on their education, which is most important. Because even if they do make it as an athlete, taking just Kidambi's example, we can say that, an educated athlete will always be able to manage himself and his career longer, enhance his career longer, because he knows what substances to avoid, what substances not to take, etc., how to plan his regime and how to plan and how to time manage himself. Currently in India, if you look at the flip side, where there are a lot of athletes who have already sacrificed education, and they've got into sport, what's happening with them right now? They are actually struggling just moving from one place to another to access facilities. So, for example, you take a good academy anywhere in India of any sport, they'll probably be just teaching only that sport. There's no residential there in most of the cases. There's no education. There's no food. There's no proper diet. There's no gymnasium. There's no swimming pool. Sports science is literally non-existent. High performance targeting is literally non-existent. So the campus that we are building aims to provide all these things under one place, so that the athlete over there who comes in, whether it's an amateur, semi-pro, pro athlete, can actually utilize the best of his time. He can get himself his training, he can get his diet, stay, nutrition, sports science, high performance targeting, sports psychology, the whole peripheral service around sport to be that world-class, top-class athlete. And beyond that, we are also offering courses in sport, right from sports management to sports medicine to sports psychology, physiotherapy, etc., where these athletes can skill themselves. Because if you look at the global average, there's no athlete who trains for more than 5 to 6 hours a day. The rest of the time is actually spent in commuting from one facility to another to access that particular facility for the particular purpose. So if we have everything in one campus, that would actually be a true meaning of the optimal utilization of that facility, because he's got everything under there and he's getting an option to educate himself within the sporting area. And beyond his sporting career, let's say, God forbid, he has an injury which is, threatening his sports career, or maybe he's retiring, or maybe he's not good enough to make it into that sport. He can at least be happy in the, in the sporting world by getting a job in the sporting world by taking up one of these vocational courses. For example, if there's a athlete, we've thought about so many things in the campus where even an athlete comes in and, he's not even he's not even passed beyond the 4th grade. What can he do there apart from sport? He can also take up courses in sports journalism in his own language, where India already has a dearth. We've got such a scarcity of good journalists. So we're trying to skill these people and make sure that we create that pathway so that all the athletes, children, whoever comes there, gets exposed to sport, gets the right facilities, and then makes it beyond that and can be part of the sporting infra even beyond his sporting career. That's the whole idea here, and that I think would be the most optimal way of looking at it, because creating, like Sir said before, India actually has a lot of sporting infra. We've got beautiful stadiums everywhere, but there's no legacy planning there. There's nobody using those stadiums right now. In fact, if I'm from Pune and I see Balewadi being used more for weddings, political rallies, or things like that, conventions, etc., but there's no sport happening there. They have very good infra, but then they don't have education, they don't have residential, they don't have right diet, they've got so many things missing. So building the infrastructure is not the challenge, but the optimal utilization of that infrastructure by having everything, the allied services around sport in that facility is what I think is key.
Which is an interesting point, because when we were trying to look at swimming pools as examples, and we realized many were not built for purpose. So, it was mostly for decorative or purposes, or to just probably sell something else. So we often found a swimming pool used as a pretty picture, or to complete a pretty picture, but no one was paying attention or looking at it as an asset from which certain outcomes, whether social outcomes, performance outcomes, or economic outcomes, were created. So build for purpose is something that I've seen through my journey is a very important point, whatever the reason is, because some want to do it today. A lot of private institutions, or even people, high net worth individuals are looking at creating infrastructure. An example was the Padukone Dravid Center of Sports Excellence in Bangalore, where it was a motivation of an individual who decided to invest in creating a certain quality of infrastructure and making that available. So today, some are doing it purely from a business perspective, saying we want sustainable economic outcomes from it because that attracts a certain quality. Also in context of, today we see globally the trying to create mixed-use facilities so that it's sustainable. Literally the target group being 0 to 100, of age. Today, right from literally creating infrastructure that's safe, comfortable, hygienic, that allows every member of the family, irrespective of their competence, to be able to come and engage with sport. And that again creates a different, it's a win-win for all the different initiatives that do exist. Like Sir said about creating a safe space for women, very, very critical point, because in the infrastructure we often forget that very fundamental of even creating the right supporting environment, like changing rooms or toilets, alongside the infrastructure that makes everyone want to come and participate. I know we're running out of time, and it's almost lunch. So, with these few thoughts, would like to open the floor for questions. I think there are some wonderful people up here.
Good afternoon to the panel. I'm Teja Prakash from IIT Madras. Speaking about the infrastructure, I would say rather than calling it as infrastructure facilitation, I would say it as a resource facilitation. So speaking about resources as such, it is not just the infrastructure with respect to the gaming or that facilitates games, but also how good are we at facilitating with coaches who are well equipped with training methodologies as such. Because when we are talking about grassroots development, we get the talent from grassroots levels, but then what happens with them is a different question altogether. So do we need to think about coaches as a critical resource also, because we lack as of now?
Yeah, please. So I think it's a very, very good thought that you have brought out, and I think what you said is right, because you will pick up talent from the grassroots and you will come to know who plays what and all that stuff. But what happens thereafter? So what we have, and I'll take the example of football because that's one of the oldest examples which Tata Steel can talk about, is that we had this selection process in the grassroots from the villages around Jamshedpur, Northeast, and so on and so forth. And then we would pick up the coaches who would be either a relevant person today as a footballer or yesteryears and bring that on. But what happened thereafter is that if you don't have enough exposure beyond that, then there's a challenge and the growth gets stunted. So after some time we realized that this is not going to work, so we started signing off with Brazil to start with. We had exposure trips, they would come in, and I don't know how many in this hall would remember Super Soccer used to happen in the late 80s and early 90s, where Brazilian teams would come in and we would play the Tata Football Academy and so on. The idea was the same as you said. Taking that as a point of extension, so what has worked for us till now, I'll not say it is the best model and it will take us to the next level or next wave, is that we always picked up individuals who excelled in some sports at that point in time. So if I was setting up an athletic academy and I wanted middle distance runners to be trained, I picked up someone who got an Arjuna award in middle distance, let's say last year. Okay. Try to get those individuals in who are relevant and current. But at times it doesn't help, because you can't suddenly say after 5 years, sorry, you are not relevant, please go home. So then thereafter, bring in the exposure part. Get them to get exposed to national, international, have more games. The challenge initially was that not many sports people or sports clubs were available. Now that has opened up a lot in India. You have enough. So for football also I can tell you, now that we are a part of ISL, because we are a part of ISL, we have 9 games in a season at Jamshedpur. Our stadium capacity is about 25,000. Average spectator strength is between 20 to 25,000. And maximum of them are from the villages around. Thereafter they will come and enroll themselves in the grassroots. Our thought process earlier was that these are people who would not be able to come and pay. They come and pay and say, nahi, mere bacche ko aap daliye, isko seekhna hai. And that kid is hardly 8 years old, 9 years old. So 3,000 to 4,000 now small kids are in the grassroots program. Surely everyone is not going to reach the top, but that's the way to take it forward. So you will need some of the earlier, I would say, star players to coach these grassroots, some of the relevants to come to the reserve ones, give them the right exposure, and then bring them to the international kind of scenario, so that at each level they are coached by the right person.
Thank you.
To probably add to that, I think the appropriate infrastructure also allows for the coaches to want to be part of something. A typical example we often talk about is a lot of people want to get into the corporate industry rather than say government. I mean, which is unfortunate, but often it's influenced by the infrastructure that exists. people see the buildings, see the environment that is available in the corporate, and that influences the mindsets of people wanting to associate. And that's the part where I see even government today changing. That's now they're creating very high quality infrastructure as well, and which is also now reflecting in the quality of people who want to be part of government as well. That being said, if from an army context, you're able to attract a certain quality of coaches and retain them from different parts of the world for different sports, how much of a role is the quality of infrastructure? How the quality of your infrastructure? How does that motivate the quality of coaches you're able to attract?
Hakim, per se, if you ask me regarding the armed forces, as Chaudhary sir said, it is the athletes who have crossed over to the second phase are the ones who are employed. We ensure that they are the ones who are sent to places where they are conducting diplomas for the coaching, and as they have been athletes themselves par excellence, so it's an added advantage to us that we have a pool of coaches which are always available. And yes, our friend he brought out a very valid point here regarding creation of coaches. There is no dearth of talent, but yes, coaches, there is acute shortage in the society as such. Everyone wants his child or a sportsman should be coached by a proper methodology from the beginning itself. Otherwise, there are games like golf, tennis, there are a whole lot of academies or the grounds where players go and pick up habits which are very difficult subsequently, even though they are very talented. But to correct them, it takes a lot of time. So the government must take up something wherein we have a lot of places, academies where we can produce coaches. We have to have such facility coming up.
Any other questions?
Hey Hakim. Hello. This question can be answered by anyone on the panel. My name is Siddharth. I am the founder of Lele Sports. We've been running community and corporate sports events for the last 8 years. My question is, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen, particularly in football and badminton, an explosion of private sports infrastructure. We run a facility in Gurgaon, which is a turf, five-a-side turf and a basketball court. We've been running it for 14 months, and the numbers are good. The economics are good, and we've seen this happening pan-India. We use a lot of these facilities. What I'd like to ask is, are there any examples, and if yes, how many, of government-operated facilities which are financially sustainable today? Because one would assume government-backed facilities would be slightly larger, but I'm just curious to know if around India there are any such examples.
Kedia sir, if you can.
I cannot think of any government facility which is financially sustainable in the sense that you are asking about. Because, infrastructure everywhere. I have seen even in Assam, because currently I am DG Sports Authority of Assam. And earlier I was with Sports Authority of India. It's very difficult to make sports facilities financially sustainable if you do not introduce a non-sports component into it. So there has always been an issue of permitting sports facilities in big sports infrastructure within courts' concessional rates. Otherwise, it will not be used. So what I feel is, I do not frown upon utilization of sports infrastructure for non-sports activities when the infrastructure is free. Because there has to be a cross-subsidization. Because that cross-subsidization was not there and is not there to the desired extent, I can't tell you of any single sports infrastructure in the government sector at least I don't know of, which is financially sustainable. All of them, they depend upon government funding.
Right, just
just 1 minute. You actually KD साहब आपने उसको फाइनेंशियल सस्टेनेबिलिटी कहा, उन्होंने सिर्फ सस्टेनेबिलिटी कहा था. तो मेरी सोच ये है कि जो उड़ीसा अब कर रहा है, उड़ीसा गवर्नमेंट जो अब कर रही है, दैट्स एक्चुअली ब्रिंगिंग द स्पोर्ट्स इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर टू सस्टेनेबिलिटी. दैट you have spent money, you have set up the infrastructure, whether it's a stadium or a rink or whatever, high performance centers. Now you get people to use it, utilize it. And I'm not saying that Orissa government का target है कि हमको इतने champion चाहिए, but the utilization of this sports arena would actually lead us there, because this is what was lacking earlier, which is now available, and it becomes sustainable. And then government, I don't think it started setting up infrastructure as getting into business of setting sports infrastructure. That was not the aim in any case.
I would like to share here that one of the meetings which I attended, wherein the DG Sai, I informed everyone that it was a meeting with all the federations, wherein they have opened all their stadiums to the public, wherein anyone who wants to hire or practice, there are guidelines which are there on their site. I would like everyone to go through. They have opened their facilities, which is a very good sign.
There's a hand at the back. Yeah, if you...
Livelihood. Thank you. So, Kedia sir, this question is for you. The PICA scheme, which was a very ambitious scheme, of course read through the manuals and the entire curriculum, which was created by several sport for development bodies. On paper, it was a brilliant scheme. You've identified some of the challenges that were there. My question is, can it be revived? Can sport for development be used as a long-term engagement with children? Because obviously we know that very few can become champions and very few will be able to take sport to the next level. But the inherent power of sport to work with young children and people has a lot of power, and we can focus on things like education, life skills and health through that. Where is PICA now? What is happening with it? Is it completely dead? What can be done to create a platform where a lot of practitioners get together and maybe come on a unified platform to leverage the power of sport? Thank you.
I'll respond to it in two ways. One is, you asked whether PICA is dead. PICA is not dead. PICA, by the name PICA, is not there, but many of the ingredients of PICA has come into Khelo India, because the whole concept of PICA was that we need to create a sports ecosystem. So PICA addressed the issue of infrastructure, PICA addressed the issue of coaches, and other aspects were there. So this is one part. It has revived into Khelo India, and I hope that it is a better scheme and it will have bigger success than PICA. This is one part. Second part is sport for development. I personally feel that in our country, the concept of sport for development is at a very, very nascent stage. We are not talking about it, even in the government, outside the government, we are not talking about it. I'll give you one example. I was a member of the Commonwealth Advisory Body on Sports, and they had a lot of focus on sport for development. I went for one of their meetings to London, and they took us to an area in London which was a disturbed area. So they said that youngsters here, they were jobless, they were not educated, and they were always busy in criminal activities. So what they did was they created a boxing academy there, and they allowed the children of that area to run that boxing academy. And they found that within a short time, the crime rate in the area came down, and those who were considered to be useless, they were providing very good leadership to that academy. These kinds of things are required in our country, but I think somehow the power of sport to establish peace and lead to development, social development, that has not been well understood so far in our country.
Just the last comment. What would be your suggestion to for sport for development practitioners to take the movement forward? That's my final question. Thank you.
I can only say nothing succeeds like success. If we have those kinds of centers which I just talked about, I mean, people talk about these things. If I can take 1 minute, I'll give you another example. There was, in one of the classes, somebody talked about an experiment in a very badly disturbed African country. You know, in many of African countries, there are ethnic groups which keep fighting between themselves. So he said that there were two groups in a neighborhood which always used to fight, and there was a lot of killing and things like that. And then somebody came up with the idea of a football coach who started coaching the children of both the ethnic groups. And ultimately it was one of the most peaceful areas in the country. Even in media, I don't hear much about sports being used for development. I will recommend a program where I saw this very effectively put forward. It was one Satyamev Jayate episode of Amir Khan. So I think in that program a few years back there was some talk about this. Otherwise, even media, I don't hear much talking about sport for development. So I think we have to create some success stories within the country.
We're running tight on time. So I would just, I'm sorry, we'll take one question to the person at the back there, and then we will have to close it. We'll, panel members will be available. And hello, if you could just,
good afternoon, sir. It's great pleasure to speak to you. And actually, I'm a swimmer, and I belongs to a very small village from Varanasi. And working for 5 years, I don't find my dream coming true, because I wanted to coach in my area. So I'm getting difficulty to create infrastructure. So people talk about infrastructure, and I know that a lot of businessmen and corporates are into that, and their aim is to earn money. But as an athlete, as a sportsman, we just hope that we can earn pride to our country. So I don't find any direct connection to the in our area, local area, so that we can produce whatever the experience we have as a coach I have to train to play for the country. So it's been like I don't have had money to join any club or anything. So I jumped every water I see and practice myself to get for the competition. But my dream is to now open an academy in my area. So I'm looking forward for help. Because I don't know much these things. This is my first time visiting Delhi. So I'm hoping that I should get help anywhere from anything, that I can create half Olympic size pool in academy in my area in Varanasi.
I guess I might be able to help you on this topic, but let's. I would just save that for maybe we can do this offline. But to give a context to the question, a lot of times when I come across this, people are looking at building big facilities. Often the bigger the facility, it's not sustainable if you're not really building for purpose. Again, the point being that. So what we've done is, we try to tell people, like the most lucrative, one of the most lucrative jobs is as being a swim teacher, and having a smaller center of teaching. You can create a lot of economic value today. We see a lot of some people from the best of education institutions actually becoming swim teachers and starting swim schools. And that's where you're able to start the change and create. So you create the economy. What we find is a lot of big infrastructure, and in this case swimming pools, being built but not utilized because they're empty. You don't have enough people coming from the bottom who are taught right, enjoy it, and are not using it. So just a small attempt that we have to build purpose-based infrastructure and make sure it's sustainable, so that it even motivates government, because as much as we often also consider at times that government can build without expecting, but then I don't think that's often the case, because then we see a lot of capital cost and shiny infrastructure in the initial period, and then it falls apart, because then the running costs become a challenge. So that's a point of attention. With this, I would like to really thank my panel for their insights, and I'm sure they will be available.
Very relevant submission, sir. Very relevant.
Okay,
just
please.
a few minutes, sir.
Please.
So I am Mohammad Ihtisham, former Deputy Director, Regional Deputy Director, Sports Authority of Andhra Pradesh. I'm basically a weightlifting coach. Now I would like to introduce one personality to this August gathering. So he is here to offer. He is not here to take anything from anybody. He is here to offer something, a great asset to the society. He is Mr. C.B.R. Prasad. He has got an academy in over a 40-acre sprawling green field, very close to Vijayawada city, 24 kilometers from Vijayawada, on Vijayawada-Hyderabad highway road, sir. So he has 40 acres with schools, English medium schools, and infrastructure with weightlifting hall, with 400
do you have a question to anyone on the panel, sir?
Yeah. He is here to offer, one Mr. C.B.R. Prasad.
Yeah. Thank
so
you.
he is here to offer to the government of India or to government of Andhra Pradesh entire property for the development of sport. His only dream is to see the India's glory in coming Olympics.
Fantastic.
He is Mr. C.B.R. Prasad.
Thank you.
He has sold away 350 acres of land only for the promotion of sport.
I think. Thank you again, and thank you for I think
Right,
we need people of different types, like I
Right,
said,
sir.
to come together. Individuals like yourselves, like Mr. Agarwal,
Sure, sir.
and institutions that each of my other panel members represent, to come together to really realize the potential we have in this
Yes.
country. So with this, I'm sorry, I have to break now. I am sure everyone's really looking forward to a lunch. Thank you very much.
Well, I would like to thank once again we'll have quickly a group photograph, our panelists and our moderator as well. And can we have applause for them? I think that was a very interactive session as well. Ladies and gentlemen, just to inform you, as you would be aware, we are running a little behind, a little more than a little behind schedule. So I'll request everyone, we would be starting our sessions in the next 30 minutes because we really have to. So I would request everyone, it's a humble request to please cooperate, finish your lunch and join.
About 2 years ago, we were invited to participate in the Hockey World Tournament. I took this up with great enthusiasm.
जो बच्चे पैदा होते हैं खास करके हमारे वेस्टर्न उड़ीसा में, दे हैव ए इनबिल्ट इनर क्वालिटी उनका होता है, तो वो पैदाइश ही उनमें हॉकी ब्लड में उनका होता है.
हॉकी वर्ल्ड कप जब अलॉट हुआ था हमें, दैट वाज 2013, उड़ीसा में हमें बड़ा सिंक्रोनाइज सा एटमॉस्फेयर मिला, जिसकी वजह से वी डिसाइडेड ऑन उड़ीसा.
The biggest challenge was getting the infrastructure completed in time.
देखिए भुवनेश्वर को हॉकी की कैपिटल कहने लग रहे हैं। भुवनेश्वर के लिए इससे बड़ी बात क्या हो सकता है? ये तो हमारे लिए गौरव की बात है।
The magnitude of the preparations for this World Cup is much more than whatever has happened so far in any other World Cups for hockey.
ये हमारी स्पोर्ट है, ये हमारी हॉकी है। यहाँ उड़ीसा में इस देश को सबसे अच्छे, सबसे स्ट्रॉन्ग, सबसे टैलेंटेड स्पोर्ट्समैन देने का मौका मिला है।
ये पहला स्टेट है जिसने नेशनल टीम, हॉकी टीम को स्पॉन्सर किया है।
So government has been working for last 10 years to develop Bhubaneswar, and today is the result what you see. I would say World Cup is like kind of a grand finale to all the celebrations which have been going on.
उड़ीसा से ही हमारा पूरा देश सीखेगा कि हाँ एक स्पोर्ट्स का कल्चर, एक स्पोर्ट्स का इवेंट कैसे करा सकते हैं।
उड़ीसा गवर्नमेंट स्पोर्ट्स को बहुत ज़्यादा आगे लेकर आ रही है। उड़ीसा गवर्नमेंट को थैंक यू कहना चाहूँगा कि उनका इतना बड़ा कंट्रीब्यूशन ऑल स्पोर्ट्स के लिए वो बहुत बड़ी बात है।
I think it's the most well equipped hockey stadium for viewers and for the hockey players and for officials.